What would happen if we all just decided not to pay our bills?
All of this is merged into this 15-minute city agenda.
The truth behind it is actually to start corralling people into ghettos. I think money, if we're going to get out of this, should go altogether.
People are just like, what makes more money? Who cares about what you're doing?
We're never happy because there's always somebody who will turn up with an even bigger and more impressive currency.
Welcome back to the Renegade Lifestyle. This will be our first piece of content of the month of August, deep diving into smart cities and specifically 15-minute cities, which are being created around the world at the moment. So the plans that are in place at the moment there, the dangers they pose, the obvious dangers, in fact, to society, and to give you solutions as well on how to avoid them, how to, create your own communities. So that's going to be the basis of the month of August. So I'm joined by Richard Vobes, also known as the Bald Explorer, as you can see, who has a great YouTube channel discussing concerns regarding the current state of the world and affairs. I advise you to check that out, and we'll have the links in the description below as well. So welcome, Richard. It's great to have you on the show. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for asking me. It's nice to be interviewing or being interviewed rather than me doing the interviewing, which I do a lot of.
Exactly. Yeah, I've seen your show recently, just been checking it out. Great stuff. You interview people sort of in the local areas, actually doing things. So like more of those kind of ground grassroots people, which is interesting in the UK. And I've enjoyed your content and a lot about smart cities and 15-minute cities as well, which obviously led me to contact you to have you on the show today. Before we go into that, though, I always ask this, especially on the first time that they come onto the show, a bit on your background and sort of how you, I guess, got to this space and how you now end up sort of discussing world affairs and what's wrong with everything in a way. How did you end up going from what you did before, or what was your background previously, and where you are now?
Well, my background, I suppose, has always been an entertainer, and that's stemmed from doing corporate entertainment, family fun days, gala shows, going around, circus skills stuff, juggling, unicycling, all that kind of stuff, festival stuff, those sort of things for a long time. My passion has always been in filmmaking. And I started off as a teenager working in Super 8 and things like that, and embraced video when it came on. And I tried to get into television, and I had in the mid-90s a kids' TV series on ITV, which was quite good. The career didn't sort of take off. It was reasonable, but I'm actually now pleased not to be in mainstream media by any means, because when I was there, I realized what a horrible place television really was, the egos, the backstabbing and the money grabbing that involved. And so branched out into YouTube, which was fast becoming a serious platform for content creators. And people were gravitating from things like young teenagers talking about Acme, which seemed to be the ones that were getting millions of views, of kids in their bedroom, to people doing more serious stuff. I mean, you still had all the sort of nonsense stuff of Charlie bit my finger and, the Fenton video, these ones that went viral. But people started to do a bit more long format stuff. And I thought, well, I'll put my stuff on there. But going on to, say, YouTube to do something relatively seriously on no budget, of course, is quite tricky unless you're just sitting and talking, which is what I do mostly now. But then I was going out and about, and I thought, I know, I'll film the countryside. I love my country. So I was really promoting England, heritage, landscape, nature, and doing all that, and did that for about 5.5 years. And then last year, I was aware, we went through the pandemic and all of that, and I was questioning all of that, but the audience were basically telling me to shut up. Don't question all those sort of things, be a good boy, wear your mask, get the what. And I thought, well, I'm not sure about that. So privately, I kept all that to myself, or on other podcasts that I was doing. But my main channel, I sort of just bowed down, I suppose, and just was carrying on talking about landscape, heritage and nature. But last year, when we got to the fuel crisis, and I watched Neil Oliver talking about the fuel crisis and what would happen if we all just decided not to pay our bills. And if we all did that collectively, what would happen? And I thought, well, that's a really interesting idea because that's people power. It's us taking back control. And that spoke to me in a big way because so much was being dictated to and was out of our hands. And so I made a video and said, is he right? And I put a picture of Neil Oliver on and put the video out, not really expecting any more than the normal numbers that I was getting, which wasn't huge. And then all of a sudden overnight, 100,000 views came in. I thought, oh my goodness. And I looked at the comments. I made another one saying, thanks very much for, looking at this one. Clearly, you're interested in this subject. And then that one went high. And I thought, this is obviously what I've got to do, talk about the issues of the day. So then I ended up going down the rabbit hole and looking at a whole plethora of stuff, which then, puts the fear into your belly thinking, oh my God, we're all doomed. It's a fait accompli. There's nothing we can do. They've been doing this for years. They're all Satanists, etc., etc. And what can we do? So many problems came at the beginning of the year in which we were being told about things like ID cards or digital IDs, then the advent of these 15-minute cities, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, and all of this, and the continuation towards net zero, all based on this nonsense of man-made global warming, which had been taken to such a ridiculous degree. And so there was so much to talk about, and my viewing figures just kept going. And I realized in time that rather than continually talking about the problem, we needed actually to have solutions. And so that's what I do now.
I think for sure we need to speak about the solutions. That's for sure. And talking about the net zero thing as well, it's an interesting one because they, I don't know if you saw a TED talk by Bill Gates a few years ago. And it mentioned like we need carbon to go to zero, and the equation was it was basically C, which was carbon, equals people times energy or something. And basically, he was just like smirked and was like, one of these has to come close to zero, and it's like,
yeah,
okay,
we know which one he means.
And everyone was like clapping and like, yeah, this is great. I'm just like, well, no one can actually see anything, but yeah, that's fine. So all of this is kind of merged into this 15-minute city agenda, really, because I guess we're going to speak about the net zero because that's kind of going to be the excuse for these sort of cities that they're trying to build in. What are 15-minute cities? Because you have done a lot of content on this, and also you're actually in the UK where they actually have one right now in Oxford that they're kind of slowly, progressively making it into one of those 15-minute jail cities. So I just wanted to understand from your perspective, especially being there, what are 15-minute cities for people who may not have really done much research on them or don't know much about them at all?
Well, let's start with towns, villages, and cities that we up until, let's say, yesterday we thought we had. And most towns, cities, villages generally have within 15 minutes all the things that you normally would need. You might need to go to hospital, which might be in the next town. And we've seen how certain hospitals over the last 20, 30 years have closed down or got bigger. And same with police, a lot of police. You used to have what was a domestic house with a bobby in the remote villages. But in towns, you've got your police station and you've got your creches. You had your post office, although they kept shutting those down all over the place. And so really and truly, I mean, life was where you lived was pretty much a 15 minutes. You might have to get on the bus and go to the next village. But, that sort of life, we couldn't have existed if we hadn't had all the stuff that we needed within relatively close range. So the concept of this 15-minute city idea, right from the start, sounds nonsense, because haven't we already got that? If I want to go to the cinema, luckily in my town there's a cinema. I can go to the cinema. Might not always play the films I want, but there's a cinema. And I've got a hospital, there's a police station. I've even got a beach, which is very nice because I live on the south coast. Now, obviously not every town has a beach. And but the plan for this so-called 15-minute city that the WEF have come up with, this concept, is that we'll have everything within 15 minutes, and we won't have to get into our cars and go anywhere because everything will be within reach, including presumably your job of work, and also I imagine a fire station, a hospital, a police station, a creche, a park, a river so you can walk, a nice wood, even a beach. Well, clearly that's a load of nonsense, because if you live in a tiny village, you're not going to have a police station, a hospital, and all those things within 15-minute cities. So the idea is really, and the truth behind it, although it sounds idyllic, is actually to start corralling people into ghettos in which some of those services might be available. But instead of having them available and saying, hey, isn't this an ideal situation, they're actually penalizing us, firstly, with our transport. So cameras are going up, which seems a bit weird. And then car movement restrictions are on. So you've got Oxford, in which a number of the streets near the city centre have been closed off. And you have these enormous flower pots that have gone up, which basically are road obstacles. And there are restrictions on these roads. And the idea is if you make a journey more than, say, 100 times, you'll get a fine. And your number plate, which is being recorded by number plate recognition cameras, of course, are going up. It's the same in London. They're trying to reduce people by charging you what they call the ULEZ. It's because it's all to do with the clean air. If you haven't got clean air in London, it'll be terrible. Except that actually, if you go out with one of these meters that measures clean air, you'll realize that actually the air quality in London is well within permitted numbers. But if you go on the underground, it's so much higher. So if you're relying on public transport in London to take you around, is actually less healthy than going in a car or walking next to cars. So it is a load of nonsense. But the end result really, and the nefarious side of this, is that they want to get people out of the countryside because they want to rewild the countryside, reduce farming almost to nothing, and we see that in the Netherlands, and have people dependent on artificial intelligence behind screens and pretty much in these ghettos, which will in the future be our prisons. Now, I know that's a lot for somebody who first hear it and will be rolling their eyes and saying, well, that just sounds ridiculous, because I think it's the 17 sustainable goals that have been put out. They all sound all very nice. It all sounds very laudable, being sustainable and having diversity and all these things. But it's all predicated on this myth that it's man's fault and we're putting out too many emissions into the world, particularly, here in England, where we're doing 1% of the damage. We're a tiny dot when you compare it to India and China and places like that. But, we've got to show them that we mean business. And so we're basically slowly committing suicide with these policies of net zero. And part of this policy is to have us all corralled into this one place. So it sounds a beautiful future, doesn't it, George?
Indeed, yeah. I mean, it seems so much like the past 3 years were just a precursor for this to be shifted in.
Yeah.
Because realistically, how would they have ever been able to try or even try all these things without what happened in the last 3 years with the pandemic? Because if now we're getting used to, we were getting used to, or the society was getting used to showing something to go into any sort of place to make sure you're complied with the rules of a certain area. And people were getting used to doing that for a couple of years. And I think that's kind of conditioned a lot of people in society to now obey or to listen to further things that are coming down the line. And I think that's probably where we're going. in regards to the sort of 15-minute city style things. In regards to them, how's Oxford looking right now? Is it actually there yet? How is it? How has it changed in the last couple of years? Is there, I guess, a clear 15-minute city as you foresee the future being, or is it just started at the moment? And what have they put in place?
So I haven't actually been to Oxford. It's about 2.5 hours from where I am, and by all accounts, it sounds like a place to avoid, to be honest with you. However, I interviewed a lady who is in Oxford about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it's not everywhere. Certainly not in the rich places. Apparently, if you live in an affluent area, you don't have the cameras, you don't have the roadblocks. It's funny that, isn't it? It's in the smaller independent streets where there's small independent shops. Obviously, large corporations you can and big brands, big supermarkets, big stores like that. For some reason, it seems that they're accessible. But if you've got a small independent shop, then they're the ones that makes it seems to be very difficult to get to. You do have to go across the bypass now, which is the A34, which is the route really from Oxford down to Southampton, pretty much, or to Winchester anyway, which is a long road, but part of the circular around Oxford is on that particular stretch. So woe betide you if you get onto there at rush hour times, because there's now an additional amount of traffic who used to be able to go across town or the city, but now they have to go and use this A34, which slows, of course, all other traffic who are just bypassing the town. So that doesn't seem a sensible idea. But also, of course, you're using a hell of a lot more petrol. So if you're worried about the emissions that cars are pushing out, then in order to avoid just going 1 mile across town and you've actually got to do 5 or 6 miles, it seems a complete load of old nonsense. But we're still at the trial period, apparently, here. It's only been going a few months, but already there have been protests. People have been cutting cameras. People have been up in arms. But the council are not listening. They're obviously under pressure. They believe, I mean, I think the council on the ground, the local councillors, believe they're doing the right thing. They don't know the bigger plan. And if anyone tells them, they roll their eyes and say, well, that's just conspiracy nonsense. Of course, nobody would want to have us living in a ghetto. The sad thing is, they'll be living in the ghetto as well, and they'll have their biometrics and their CBDCs and everything else that will be coming on top of these 15-minute cities. They'll be tracked and traced just as much as anybody else, but they just don't seem to see it. And that's the difficulty of trying to get that message through to them.
Is there currently a stage where if you leave your 15-minute zone for like longer than a certain period, you get fined? I know it's quite unlikely you would do that because it's like something very small, I believe. But I heard something that you will get a very small fine if you spend more than, I think it was 300 odd days a year outside of the zone. I don't even, to be honest, I haven't done the research on that. But I wanted to ask you if you knew anything about that, because I heard something about this sort of thing.
I don't think that that's there at the moment, but I can imagine that those sort of plans would be in place. Anything really financially crippling to you to keep you inside your property, rather than actually going out, and particularly not going into your car. So I think, yeah, I mean, there's going to be once this is in I mean, the theory is once this, I don't think it's going to happen, by the way. I think all of this is quite a big distraction from other things that are going to happen, but this is what we're being funneled into, and our attention is fighting something which I think ultimately is not the main thing. But I think that's the concept, that you're going to be there, financial penalties, so the richer people will be able to mitigate all of that. But the rest of us useless eaters possibly will have a hard time paying for all of this and remain even more in debt than we already are in this fiat currency world that we live in.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting part of it is the distraction, like you mentioned. What do you see actually being the main issue coming in the next few years? I have my own theory of, I think the main issues will be economically, where, well, I mean, it could be health wise as well, right? And there could be war, it could be so many things, it could be all of it. But I think economically, we're pretty close to failure, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know how many more times they're going to do quantitative easing or printing of currency until it just hyperinflates to basically zero. I mean, I'm waiting for that to happen almost. So, I mean, what do you think this is a distraction for, or what's coming?
Well, I think there's a number of issues which I guess we're all trying to work out exactly which one is the thing, because there's so many distractions. There's definitely the depopulation of the planet, and we saw that with the medical intervention that we had. It's been suggested to me that with nanotechnology inside that particular drug that was injected into people, that there will be some form of signal and tracking and tracing of certain individuals. And I have somebody who wants to talk to me and says he's got proof of that. I mean, I'm keeping an open mind on all these things. So I'm not saying any of this is dead certain, because I haven't got the knowledge. And when you run a channel like that, you get a lot of interesting, let's say, suggestions of what might be happening, and you've got to sort of evaluate. So there's that. The financial thing, I think that we've seen that with China, the way in which the social credit and being a good citizen is being pushed down their throats, and I think that is also something that they would like to see with us. I don't think you have to do that in a penal way. I think you could get people to be far more conscientious in a more positive way, so that we're not wasting things and we're not stripping the planet of its things. But it's almost as if we're all untrustworthy, we're all unwashed and guilty. We live in a world in which you are guilty, and unless you can prove your innocence these days, which is complete arse about face. So I think there's that. It's, you wonder if it's just about money, but I think these people, the billionaires who seem to be pushing this agenda, they've got enough money to do whatever they damn well like. They can buy as many planets now as they want. So I think it's beyond money. I think it's power. And of course, we've seen in the film The Sound of Freedom that there is a lot of child trafficking going on, a lot of paedophilia going on. And that, I think, also is a big part of the cabal's weird and depraved activities that are also part of this. Quite how all these bits fit together, I don't know, because fortunately I'm not a member of any of these nefarious groups, thank goodness. But I do think, however, let me just add to the money side of things, with the CBDCs and all of that. I think we're at a very interesting moment with the threat of the CBDCs. I've been told that actually they won't be able to implement it. I don't think the quantum computers are even ready to be able to do it. I think it's still a big threat to make us worry and think about what we're going to do with our money. But actually, I think that we're in an interesting situation where the biggest out of all of this is if we find a much more, let me think, a much more positive thing than using money. I think money, if we're going to get out of this, should go altogether, because it's through debt and having to work to earn money, these permission slips to be able to purchase something, that's all the time is keeping us in debt and fearful that we haven't got enough of this substance, which somebody else is saying, oh, cost of living's too much. Oh, you've traveled across the town, we'll charge you that. Well, if we eradicated money, we basically eradicate all the problems, and the billionaires suddenly have nothing.
Yeah, I mean, the billionaires, well, the ones who are, I guess, controlling things, they not they don't need more money. Yeah, people. I think that's where people kind of like. I hear a lot of people, like, oh, they've done it for money. There's just profit making. To a certain extent, the companies are doing that, and there's like definitely Like they use this tool of federal notes or the sterling pound to control the rung underneath them. They use that as the carrot in front of the on the
The
stick there in
donkey,
front
yeah.
of. Yeah, but they don't need that because they created it, and they create it. Like they can literally, I guess, just somehow print it out and just give it to themselves. They don't need that. They actually want, I believe, anyway, is the control. They've clearly got no connection to a I'm thinking like a good soul. They just have no connection
Yeah.
to nature. They basically are these people who just have serious trauma and they want to control everyone. They've been through a lot of issues. I'm sure they were probably under their own pedophilia issues when they were kids, so they're now doing the same. So it's like that's kind of the trauma cycle, and I'm sure that's potentially the reason. But it's just pure control, in my opinion, nothing to do with money, but
Yeah.
they use that money to control the corporations to do what they say, to the other governments, etc., politicians with all the lobbying, etc.
No, I agree.
And in terms of getting rid of money itself, interesting. I think barter worked. The only issue is in a connected world, it's difficult long distance, of course. How do you see that working? If I think barter is excellent because you're getting rid of the use of the money system, which is obviously created by the sort of central banks, which control inflation. They control pretty much everything. When you put your money in a bank account, it's not yours because they basically just loan that into most of that money into someone else, and then they never really have those cash reserves there. So, what do you think? Um, how would it work then? Would it be a barter system, in your opinion?
Well, this is, I mean, this is the interesting thing because you have to, I suppose, you have to start with what is money to begin with. What is it? What does it do for you? Um, and I think there's a whole sense of philosophy here that would take too long to fully go into, and I'm still trying to grasp the concept. It's just that the one, if you take away, I suppose, if you take away money as the stick, which is beating us, and you might say, well, that's impossible. How do you do that? Well, I'm sure there are ways of doing it, but it's the stick that is beating us because people can't pay their bills or they can't do this, and it's the threat that this thing has over us. But if you took it away, then you have no threat. And let's say you live in a community in which, as you said, you're bartering, you're helping one another, you're eating healthy foods instead of going to the supermarket eating highly processed food, which actually has got so many chemicals in, it's killing you. Let's say you're bringing water out of, I don't know, the well or somewhere. You're looking after each other. If you're not paying for a service. So here's an example I read in the book earlier today about money. Let's say I don't know if you've got children, but let's say you've got a daughter, just for the sake of argument, and you're living on your own with your daughter, and all of a sudden you've got to go and do something because some emergencies come up, and you need to have somebody look after your daughter. You could, of course, give your daughter to be looked after by a friend who you know and trust and you've built a relationship with. Might be your sister or a member of the family or somebody like that. So away you go and you do that, and then you go off and do the important thing that you had to do, and you come back and your daughter is fine and she's had a lovely time with the relation or the friend that she already knows. Alternatively, of course, you could pay some money to a professional childcare person, and so that person comes in, looks after your daughter, probably fine, no problem with them. But your daughter hasn't had the same experience with somebody they know. And possibly they've had more fun because they know that person, they've got a relationship, they built up something. You've gone to work knowing that you've got somebody who you don't know in this world of strange people. There's somebody who's got your daughter, you're not familiar. Yes, you've paid money, but you're not sure. Whereas if it's with your sister, your granny, or whomever, you've got that relationship, you know how safe your daughter is going to be. So there's always that little bit of worry. And so what I'm saying there is that if you've paid for a service, is that the same as your sister, your nan, your granddad, your friend doing the it's more value has come from the time that and you have also then not had to worry about oh, I'm paying for this. Were they good people? What was their background and all of that? Because you know your sister, your family members, etc. And so money has facilitated something, but was it really good? So I mean, there'd be many, many more
They
examples.
say they say it takes a village in that case to raise a child,
Exactly.
and you know that's how it used to be, and I think we, in a sense, probably have lost a lot of the old values through career because we, due to economic issues, let's say they've just completely inflated money, so you now need two people to work, so the kid now has to go to school early or has to be looked after by someone else, so you pay money.
So,
Whereas if you, yeah,
sorry, I'll just jump in there because you say that two people have to go to work. What work are they doing?
yeah, I mean that's true. Yeah,
And the work that they're doing, is it necessary? You know,
yeah, I mean,
if you're working for a call center, I mean, in the great scheme of things, if there's a drought and you need to get water quickly, working in a call center might not be the best option. Knowing about where you can get water from might be a better option.
yeah, that's definitely something I was going to go on to because learning the basic skills of life, because we've lost that. I think we've kind of gone
Yeah,
too far into, like, we don't even know why we're doing something now. It's just for money.
yeah,
I've definitely lost that now. Like, I'm basically, if I'm doing something, it's going to be at least to do with moral or freedom or at least helping someone. But I used to work in investment banking, and I never really knew why I was there and what it even done to people. I was just there for money.
right.
Yeah, this is the career to make money, which is completely ego and selfish, etc. But that is the norm in cities. People are just like, what makes more money? Who cares about what you're doing? Almost. Okay, I guess there's a limit for most people in terms of crime and stuff, but that's the career cycle. Let's get the most money possible. It doesn't matter really what career I go into. But I think the solution, which we'll want to come on to, having a community of people of different skill sets. For example, if someone has a problem with a roof, instead of paying money to someone might know how to redo a roof in the community. You can help them with something else when that goes wrong. So basically, the whole community gets together and helps each other with issues. So you never really need anything else. And I think that would probably be a great solution. Something where you have freedom enclaves of people that actually just help each other with raw skills. Because what do we go to work for? For money to pay for food, shelter, water, whatever. But we need to decentralize these things because once things get centralized, that means there's a power involved. Someone's got power over that facility. Wherever the power is, basically, is where evil goes. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing that definitely move forward. What do you think about a potential sort of community in that sense? Do you see it like that also?
I totally agree. I mean, one of the things that's happened is we've all become consumers, and mostly we consume something. We buy that nice new car, and for a month or so, we're quite happy driving out in that nice new car. Except there's always that. Well, if only I did a bit more money, I could have bought the next version up with the nice seats or something like. We're never happy. There's always something nicer and shinier that apparently is going to make us happy. That as soon as we get it, it's like, okay, that's not it. And yet the love of a good woman or a good man, your children's first smile, you know, their first teetering on their legs as they walk, they're the things that make you happy. That beautiful sunrise first thing in the morning, that first tomato of the season, that the taste just explodes in your mouth, they're the real things that make you happy, I believe. Not just having a car or whatever it is so you can swank about town and go, hey, look at me, aren't I clever? Because there's always somebody who will turn up with an even bigger and more impressive car, and you go, bollocks, that's that's put me in my place. Um, we consume, for example, in the old days, if you think before we had record players, before we had tape recorders, before there was MP3 downloads and all of, and streaming technology, in the old towns and villages, we would go to the pub and perhaps someone would play a piano. We would join in, we would sing, we would be part of that music. Even if it's just stamping your foot or clanking your cup or clapping along with it, we would be part of the music. We'd be part of the scene. But now we're just consuming. We let somebody else create it. We just sit there in our little ghettos with headphones on or whatever it is and listen to somebody else's creations, which is nice, but we're not being very creative. And being creative is incredibly satisfying. You've done something that wasn't there before, even if it's as ethereal as music, where you've joined in and you, even if you don't know the words and you've just gone la 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 la, whatever, you're part of it. You're in joy. You're having a good time. So I think, as you say, community and being part of that wonderful ecosystem of people who are helping one another. And shouldn't every moment on this earth that we have, it's so limited, be fun and we get the most out of, instead of having to trudge a 2-hour commute to a job we hate with people around that we have no special connection with, and yet we're spending a huge amount of time with these people who annoy us left, right, and centre on the other side of the desk, who haven't had a proper shave or they smell of BO, whatever it is. And you think, I just don't want to be here. And it's that money that's forced us, that need of money. And yet we could be planting our own food, helping granny get across the road. We could be looking after one of that, as you say, the chap across who's doing a bit of roofing. Well, I don't know much about roofing, but I'll hold the ladder for you. And if when people do things together, they have fun. And they're the things that don't cost anything. You're having fun doing things together. If it's you on your own balancing up there on the roof in all weathers, it's not much fun. But if you've got a few friends, it doesn't matter what the situation, you've got wet, what a story to say in the pub that night, and then other people go, oh, I'll buy you a drink for that because you look like you've had a dreadful time. And that's what life should be. And we do need to get back to that to understand why we're here. If we're spiritual beings in physical bodies and we're having that physical experience, let's have a fun one instead of some miserable, worryful, stressful time. I mean, it just seems ridiculous. And we're sophisticated and cultivated, apparently, and yet we're still living in this sort of penal, under the thumb, tyranny type world. It just seems absolutely, the cleverer we seem to be, the worse off we seem to get.
Yeah, and it's interesting that, because I think once you realize that the tyranny is actually, in my opinion, I actually see that the whole tyranny stuff, and I see it as, how do I say it? I see it as being an illusion. I actually see us as being able to create your reality. Now, I'm not one of these new age people that just, high in the sky and just everything's fine. But I would say that I feel like you can create what you want to see in your world. And I do believe that is helping others. I don't see that as just being you doing it for yourself and your own family. I think that's actually a problem in the world. We've been focused just on our immediate selves, mostly in the new age now. But even previously, just your own nuclear family was the focus. But then you kind of disconnect from the rest of the community, which I think is a problem. And this money thing, I mean, it's clear, I think, who said, Bob Marley? I think it was, money is numbers and numbers never end. If it takes money to make you happy, your search for happiness will never end. That's it. Yeah. So which is true. You'll never have enough. If you're in that mindset that you're not happy with what you have, then you have a Mercedes, you'll want a Lamborghini, and then you'll want a new Lamborghini, and then someone else will drive with something else. So, like you said, I think it's definitely a mindset that needs to change. But I'm not betting on everyone waking up to it.
No.
But certainly the ones who can see and hear, I think, giving and offering solutions would be that, just changing the mindset. And I know people here in Cyprus who have set up a community where they help each other, like you said. So someone has a problem with their home, they all go there and help, and then they just go round, and it seems to work. Even here in a village, I'm in a village in Cyprus, people meet up and sit outside. They're singing all together. There's kids in the street. Like when I moved from England, especially London for sure. It's probably different in other places, but from London to here, and you see kids riding bikes in the road at night, and no one is worried about, you know, uh, potential issues that can happen, especially in London. Most people in London now, kids are just locked up inside playing metaverse or just
Yeah.
basically video games, which is such a shame. But it's a breath of fresh air seeing that there is actually alternative stuff going on. There are places that are further back, and I think we need to take it back there. And yeah, it's interesting. I think that is the solution, um, like you said. So we'll see. We'll see.
I think
Any
it's,
last thoughts?
well, I
Yeah.
was going to say, I think it's hard for people who are so brought up on possessions and material things to let go of them, because and also that feeling that money is a thing that you, if you've got money in the bank, you're not going to want to sort of say, oh well, let's have an end of money, because you've got some sort of security of however much you've got. And if you haven't got any money, you might be worried about whether, but you're relying on just enough to come and pay Peter to pay Paul and all of that. But so people relying on those materialistic things that we need, it's going to be very hard to get people to let go. However, I do think, solution wise, that people, and I say this quite a lot, I think people are like water, that they'll take the line of least resistance. Water will always find its way through the cracks and the fissures and things like that, and it will get, from high to low points. And I think if people like you and I and millions of others who are awake start to the pioneers, if you like, start to show that there is another way of living, which is community based, sort of gifting our time and our efforts and all of that, and that we're actually having a good time, and that we're laughing and we're healthy because we're growing our own foods and things like that, then I think the other people will start to say, hang on a minute, I want a bit of that, actually. And they don't need to know all the conspiracy theory stuff. They just need to know this is a good life. And I think slowly they'll start forgetting about the Lamborghinis and the hordes of cash that's not going to, when you've stripped the world of all the things you can eat and it's a barren land, you still can't eat cash. You still can't eat money, can you? So, but I think people will gravitate, and it's down to the likes of, particularly somebody like yourself who's younger, and me. I still hopefully got some time left in me to
If
show.
you're eating those organic fruits and veg, I
Well,
think so.
that's it. So it's down to us to pave the way, and then they'll come, and I think they'll come running.
Yeah, I think it's being that light in the darkness, and I saw that a lot during the sort of last 3 years. But yeah, like you said, I think it's. I actually think that it's interesting that I think this is all a push for people to end up like seeing what the better way of life is. Actually,
Mm,
I had a conversation with a few people over the last couple of years, and I've started instead like you're angry. First you're kind of like, is it real? Or, like,
yeah.
what's going on with this thing, like the pandemic? But then you get angry because you realize, it's a scam, or whatever. And then after the anger stage, you kind of start to think, and you start to change. And I started to feel like this is kind of just a push. I'm seeing it as a push for people who can see and who can hear to change their lives and be see the good from the bad, basically. How to live well, you've been lost this whole time, so you need to change your way. And I think that's slowly, I think people will have to change or get trapped in a smart city if that comes around. We'll
Well,
see.
I agree there, because it's that thing about, if you're a smoker and you've smoked all your life, and then all of a sudden you have that health issue, and they say, I'm really sorry, your lungs are collapsing and you've only got so much time to live, and you go, oh, and they say, well, it's all right, you can change your way if you change now, and there's a path out. Um, and I think we're kind of, people need to be right on the edge of the cliff before they actually change. And I think this is a golden opportunity that we have, with the threat of all these things, the threat of the smart cities, the threat of the biometrics and the implant chips and the transhumanization and all of that. I think we are on the edge of the cliff, and we can, like lemmings, just jump off, as we're being told is the next way. Or we can say, do you know what? Actually, let's do something different. Let's change the world. And I think that's what we'll do.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's a great way to finish up there as well. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you.
It's been my pleasure too, George. Thank you so much.
Nice one. We'll definitely try and have you back on to discuss other things. We kind of only touched on the 15-minute city
I
thing
know,
for about
sorry
half
about
of it. No, but do you know what? Most of that was solutions, I think. And yeah, we will speak. The next episode, actually, guys, will be Free Cities Project. We'll speak to those guys who are doing some amazing things in that project. So we'll see what they're about. So catch that next time. Thank you very much for listening. So remember also to, I guess, like, subscribe, and check out Richard's channel as well. Also check out the Renegade Lifestyle website, renegadelifestyle.net, for more info on the project, as well as checking out our email list. So subscribe to that. We give you golden nuggets to, I guess, implement those things into your lives. So information on operating outside the banking system, operation get out of big cities and actually grow your own food, advice over that. So yeah, check out, subscribe to the email list. We have a lot of information there. We give you at least one or two emails a month there as well. So yeah, I guess until next time, thank you very much and peace.